Minister, thank you very much for taking time out to talk to us.
That's great. Thank you for coming to chat.
First and foremost, I know there's a Business Council meeting with Ghana and the UK, but if I may ask, have you been to Ghana yet?
So yes, I was in Ghana in February. Actually, just the way time is worked out, I was in Ghana the day after Russia had invaded Ukraine. So some really important discussions we were having, of course, about global security and defence. But I was there at the same time as well as our trade envoy. So we also had some more discussions about supporting each other in trade. And then I'm going to be there again in a couple of weeks for the annual meeting of the African Development Bank. So really important relationship between Ghana and the UK.
Fantastic. Obviously, this is the aftermath of Brexit. And if you can just let us know what noticeable changes in terms of trade with Ghana.
Good question. You know, one of the things about the UK being an independent nation from our own trade policy is it means that we can be more nimble in terms of working with other countries across the world, which we couldn't do when we were part of the European Union trading bloc. So Ghana is a really important country for the UK, you know, relationships going back many, many years, decades, centuries. We have about £1 billion worth of trade between our two nations at the moment. We want to take that to 1.4 billion by the end of 2024. So we've set ourselves that 2-year target now to do that. Of course, we've had other shocks and things that have happened. The COVID pandemic now as well, because of Russia's awful illegal invasion of Ukraine. We've got this food price and fuel price shock, fertilizer too, that's impacting on economies. So having this business council allows us to talk about those sort of economic issues, but both global but also domestic to each other, as well as what can we do to be unlocking and increasing the trade between our countries.
And what has been the main focal point of discussion during this business
meeting?
A
key part of the discussion that I was there was talking about the economic situation, which we know is challenging for the government. I mean, countries across the world have taken on a significant amount of debt, especially during the COVID pandemic. You know, Ghana actually reacted really quickly and decisively to support the country during the pandemic. But that has pushed up their debt. It did lead to a recession. But then they were talking to me about, both the trade minister and other ministers were talking to me about how the economy is coming back. You know, one of the fastest recoveries they've seen in Africa, and what they see as being able to rebuild that economic stability. So as good friends, we've been also helping them look at issues like how do you increase your tax take, that whole fiscal consolidation. So we were getting an update on those issues as well. And then we've been talking about how we support the country through our export credit agency as well.
The UK-Ghana Business Council is to promote bilateral relations and partnership between Ghana's private sector and UK counterparts with the aim of creating investment opportunities. So I asked the Minister on the kind of projects undertaken by the UK in Ghana.
There's different infrastructure sectors that we've been helping. So, for example, UK companies just been very involved in these Moby Bridges projects, which is going to help access more rural areas that are hard to reach. The OneWeb company has been helping to get internet access. The UK Investment Finance has been helping to invest in the healthcare sector as well, through clinics and others. So those sorts of projects. But actually, a lot of different companies very focused on how can we improve investment in Ghana, because it's a country that's got very strong diaspora tribes. It's a country that, compared to some of its regional neighbours, is actually quite easy to do business in. We do need to help that fiscal consolidation and the economic outlook for the country and its debt to be stabilised. So that's where we're also listening and as friends working together on what more can we do to help.
When it comes to investment across Africa, China becomes part of the discussion. According to the Foreign Research Institute, financing of Chinese contracted projects in Africa peaked in 2015 at 55 billion US dollars. By 2016, China was the largest exporter to Africa, accounting for 17.5% of African imports. By mid-2017, more than 10,000 Chinese-owned companies were operating in Africa. Since 2010, a third of Africa's power grid and infrastructure has been financed and constructed by Chinese state-owned companies. So I put to the Minister if this was a concern for the UK.
So one of the things that we've been doing in the UK under our current Foreign Secretary is really focusing on what is the UK's offer in terms of helping to support funding for infrastructure. And we've taken what used to be called the Commonwealth Development Bank, which had been going for a very, very long time, for over 70 years, Commonwealth Development Corporation. We looked at what it does, given it more different tools that it can use, financial tools, to support economic growth, and rebranded it as British International Investment. And BII is looking at projects all across the continent, but actually in other parts of the world too, for example in the Caribbean, and looking at how it can help unlock other investment. So for example, in Ghana, they're looking at how they can get some of their balance sheet in to support small and medium-sized enterprises, similar to a deal that we've recently done in Kenya as well, and a deal that we were doing in Nigeria where they've put up a fund that will help get small energy projects off the ground. So BII will also work on larger scale infrastructure investments as well. So again, when I visited in Kenya recently, East Africa's largest solar farm has been funded by British International Investment. So that's a key part of our tool. And what we make it really clear, and with this new toolbox that we've given them, is we want to make sure that when we invest from the UK into infrastructure in African countries, that it is absolutely transparent, that it is honest, that it is reliable, that you don't get a deal from your lender that suddenly comes with extra strings attached. That if a deal doesn't go quite how it wanted, that we'll talk to the country, okay, and try and work out what the best way forward. But sometimes when we've seen other countries offer infrastructure money, it's sounded very good value, but actually, if things haven't gone quite according to plan, it's been an absolute nightmare for the country concerned. So this is why we want to have this honest, reliable funding.
Looking at the way in which China has invested, does it limit the influence of Britain, particularly across Africa?
I think it's different. I think when I've been across the continent, and I've now visited more than a dozen different countries in the 6 months that I've had this job, I've been talking to businesses, been talking to government ministers as well. In some places I've said they've felt this sort of reticence more recently, okay? You know, and looking at this sort of what is the different offer. So I don't really want to criticise other countries because that's not a very British thing to do. What I want to say is what we want to do, which is we want to make sure that you have honest, reliable, trustworthy financing, okay? Sometimes that means that putting a deal together, preparing it, takes more time in the preparation, okay? Before you actually see, you know, concrete spades digging or whatever, concrete being laid. But that often is worthwhile, that you'll get to the end of a project faster. You'll often get to an end of a project actually cheaper if you spend more time and investment. And this is what we will say to countries, is, you know, look at it. When you take a deal from the UK, on average, actually, the time to completion, the cost of the deal is less, the expertise is greater, the excellence is greater, and so that's what we're offering. But it is a really big change in the way that we're trying to help our friends and partners around the world.
In terms of access, Ghana's access to UK's market, is there any significant change there, or is still the same under the current economic partnership agreement?
Yes, I mean, it is, Ghana, as I said, will always be a good friend of the UK. Ghana's obviously had its sovereign credit ratings reduced recently by some of the rating agencies, and so that is something we've been talking to them about. How do they tell their story? How are they looking to address that? Because that will make more private companies as well more confident. But you know, when I've been out in Ghana and met British companies back in February, there's still a lot of keenness to do a lot more trade. And you know, it's a wonderful country, wonderful people, and people want to open up those opportunities.
Thank you very much, Minister.